Hi, this video will present an example of using Survey123 for ArcGIS to gather employee health status securely and easily. Survey123 is a great Esri software tool for gathering this sort of information, and to help us bake in the flow of rules that drive the process, we'll use ActiveG Nash workflows. But first we need to understand what the process is, and it goes something like this. The employee receives an email invitation to complete the health survey. The employee then clicks a link in the email to open the Survey123 survey. Then the employee either agrees or declines to report their health status. If the person declines, then a message is sent to the HR administrator to follow up personally to address the employee's concerns or needs. If the employee agrees to report his health status, he answers some questions affirming good health. Then he receives notification via email to report to work. If the employee's health status is not good, he receives instructions on remaining at home and getting care. In both situations, the employee supervisor is notified of her employee's status. Of course, your specific use case may be different, but you can use this flow as a starting point. Now, Milton will dig into the details of how to configure the Nash workflow to enable this process flow within ArcGIS.
I'm Milton, and I'm going to be showing you how we create all the automation behind the scenes for this. So the data has already been built out for this demo. So we have a survey with some conditional answers. So if you accept this, you can submit the rest of the information. If you don't accept it, the rest of those fields don't show up. And we've published that. It's now live on the web. It's public facing so that people can put their information in here. We're using a person ID, which is the global ID of the person submitting it. This was sent to the user, like this is sent to Clark Kent. And this user is then able to just click on this URL. And we know who it is, which keeps your data anonymized so that if there were to be a breach on this public-facing survey, everyone's data is a little more secure. Then we have a key that matches up to that of employees and contractors. This has a service, a GIS service associated with it. And we have the temperature survey itself, or the COVID survey. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to use all this data. So let's jump into Nash here. So ActiveG's Nash has workspaces, and we use workspaces to kind of keep things separate. You don't want to have to dig through all of your data connections to try to figure out what you're doing. So let's go to our workspaces and let's create a new workspace. So workspaces hold your data connections and they hold your workflows. So kind of grouping them by what their function is. So if I had one that sent the preliminary email, I'd want to put it in here. And if I have one that sends the response email, I would put it both in the same workspace because they're kind of related together. So we're going to go ahead and make a workspace by clicking the plus button up here. And I'm going to name this my COVID-19 temp survey. All right, and I'm the owner, I'm admin, so I'm logged in as. I can share this with groups, so groups of people can have, you can put multiple people in a group and share it with the whole group. Makes it easy to just remove people from the group as they move on or whatever. Or you can share it with individuals directly. So I'm going to share this with Andy and Danny. And go ahead and back out of this and see my COVID-19 temperature survey. There are no workflows in here, and there are also no connections in here yet. So let's go ahead and set up our connections. So the first connection I'm going to want to connect to is this survey. So this survey data is all contained in this REST service URL here on ArcGIS Online. You can do this on Portal too. So I'm going to just copy that URL. And I'm going to come into Nash. I'm going to click Add a Connection. So this is going to be my temp survey. And it's ArcGIS Online. I'm going to put this URL in here, put in my username and my password. See if I got that right. That's right. Then I go ahead and save it. So this is the survey. Now we have that available for use in workflows. We're going to add another one here that is the employees and contractors. The reason we're going to do this is because we need to take that global ID that was encoded and translate that back to a user. So then get that user information. So I'm going to scroll down here, copy that URL, same as last time, paste that in here. Employees and contractors for COVID, put in the username and the password. Test that, save that. Okay, so then the other part of what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be sending out emails to people based on how they respond. And so we need to make a connection to an email server. So I'm going to click Add Connection here. I'm going to choose Email. And I'm going to call this Admin Email or HR Email, because we want this to come from HR. But for right now, while we're just testing and building this, we're going to have this come from me because I know my username and password. We can have the user of the HR user come in here and put their username and password at a later time. So the URL, I'm using Office 365, so you need the STMP URL. So this is the one for Office 365. Fairly easy to use. Put in my can't type all of a sudden. And then my username and password. Test that. Make sure we get a valid connection. And go ahead and save that. So now we have our 3 connections. You can always come back in here at a later time, edit these. I can come in here right now. All the emails will be coming from myself. And at another time, we can come back in here and change this, and the flows will automatically switch to the new connection. So it's really handy for doing like dev test prod or just being able to switch up how things are running. So it's pretty simplistic there. So now we're going to start our workflow. So we're going to process the surveys as part of this. So we're going to make a new workflow. We name it. So process survey and send email response. All right, we can put it on a schedule at a later time. Right now we're just testing and building this, so we won't turn on the schedule yet. But you can turn it on to where it runs every day of the week. You can set it for certain times a day. So if you only want this to run in the morning between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m., you can set that up, and you can set up a frequency. A lot of things we are currently running on a schedule. We have webhooks that are coming in version 1.1, which is just around the corner. So those will be able to be triggered from outside sources. But right now we're just doing on a schedule to just check if there's been any changes. So let's go ahead and save this. Now we have a workflow. We can enable it. We can make it run on a schedule like that we set up there. So let's go ahead and open it up and look at our blank canvas here. So now we need to get into the logic. So this logic, I like to just take this apart one step at a time. And so the first thing we're going to do is we have this survey and it has that person ID on it. So when they submit it, let's just run through one scenario that could happen. They could decline to answer any questions. So let's go ahead and deal with that scenario first. So we're gonna have an input. So I'm gonna just drag this input node here. I'm gonna make this my start node, and I'm gonna call this survey in. And I'm going to pull from the temperature survey. Probably not named super well there, but more clear there. And then we can choose what fields we want to pull from this. So let me tell you what I know we need. We need the object ID because we want to tell the survey we've looked at this and we've edited it. So we're going to take the object ID. We want to get the person ID because we want to be able to look up who this is. We want to see if they've accepted this. We want to see what their temperature is, if they've been exposed to anyone in the past 3 days or had any symptoms of COVID, or if they've been to a large gathering. And then the rest of these are actually just informational and won't help us here. So 1 equals 1. Let's go ahead and test that. I just want to get all of the records. Ooh, that's not what we want. We want to get then where the status. I like to just copy and paste because then I don't fat finger stuff. So if the status is null, let's test that and see if we get the right number. 1 record, that's what we want. So I have 1 test record in here, and we just want to make sure that that's all I get there. So we can look at that record here. So we can see the object ID is 9, that they had a temperature of 100.3. This is their global ID. And, oh, their person ID, that's what I was looking for there. And doesn't have an X and a Y because it is just a table. So let's go ahead and save that. So now we have our input. Now let's go ahead and make our first output. I like to take the logic and figure out what all my inputs are going to be, and then all of my outputs are going to be. So the first output is going to be to HR. So if they decline to fill out the survey, I would like to inform HR, hey, Clark Kent refused to fill out the survey. And then they can do whatever they need to do with that. They can contact them directly, whatever the company's standard policy is. So I'm going to send out via the HR email a message. And so now we just need to determine what fields we need to send to send a valid message. And so everyone pretty much should know this. You need to send a to. We already have a from because it comes from our user. We need a subject and we need a body to our email. So then we are going to choose an action. So with other types of objects, you can have more actions. In this case, all we can do is just send an email through an output. So now we're going to save that. So now we need to put the logical steps in between here and between the input and the output that determine if that's what we need to do. So we're going to add one more input real quick because we need to go and find that user's name. So let's connect this up here. We're going to pull from the employees and contractors. We're going to grab the employees and contractors. We're going to need first name, last name, email, and the supervisor. So, and then the where clause. Now this one is where we start to get a little bit more complicated because as you can see, we already have this input 1. So I'm going to need to pull from the, this is the employee information. So I want their first name, last name, email, supervisor, and global ID. So we're going to go where the global ID equals, and I'm going to format this so that I pull that global ID. Interestingly, when I made those global IDs, those person IDs, I had an error or not an error, just a weird bit of logic that removed the curly braces on my global ID. So I'm going to just populate those curly braces manually here. So I go $, curly brace inside of here, and then it gives me the option to pull data from previous inputs or outputs as that data gets changed throughout the flow. So I need the person ID here. I need a second curly brace here. GIS always uses a single quotes around that. And we'll go ahead and save that. Now, when I have I call these substitutions, when I have a substitution like this in here, you can't use the test button. That's invalid parameters is what it will say. So what we're going to do is add a log node and just double check that everything's working right so we can go and look at input 1 and input 2 and just do some testing here. So when I press play up here, it's going to open up the logs down here and we'll be able to see that information come up. So I'm able to clear logs quite easily and just close the drawer that the logs come in. So let's go ahead and see what happens here. All right, so you can see that input 1 came in right here. It gives you all the attributes that we pulled. And then we have our input 2, and you can see that it pulled the information from Clark Kent. So everything so far is working the way we're intending it to. All right, I'm going to remove this logger. I'll keep it around in case I want to use it later, but I'll kind of like to keep my logs to a minimum and when I don't need them. So now we need to do some logic. And the way we're going to do some logic here is with a switch. So switches are really just your most basic logic. They can be yes, no questions. They can be greater than, equal to, and you stack up a whole bunch of scenarios. So switches work against a single field. We can choose that here. We're going to look to see if they've accepted this, accepted the survey. So if they've declined to the survey, we want to send an email to HR. So let's go ahead and just add that logic. So right now, everything goes through the default case. So if A isn't true, it's going to automatically go to B. So our default is just where everything's going to go no matter what. So you can use switches just to set a bunch of values if you want and not do any logic here. But really, they're built for logic. So I'm adding a case. So in my first case, if acceptance equals decline, let's save that. Let's come here. And do I remember if they accepted or declined? I don't. Let's view that and look at that. So, oh, it's got a capital on there. Okay, so it's always important to get your cases right. It will make a big difference. So if they didn't decline, we're going to assume they accepted it. Let's go ahead and save that. So here's the decline. Decline goes to, this is email to HR. Actually, I don't connect those directly. I have to load some information into here. So let's make a mapper. We could load it here in the switch, but usually I find it easier to load them in with mappers because I can make the numbers on the outputs match for the mappers, and I just feel better about loading all of my data in there at once. So this is going to be my email to HR mapper. I'm going to map to the email to HR. It's going to be to, I'm just going to use my own email because this is a test case. So milton.williams@activeg.com. And the subject is user declined survey. Okay. And like I say, then they can determine what they want to do with that. And then we need just a little bit of body to that email so that they know who it was that declined it, and We could even put that here in the subject, but I already have the text already prepared here. You can see I've got user input 2. That's where we brought in the first and last name. Has declined the survey. Please contact directly. So then we can go ahead and connect this all the way through. So now if a user was to decline, they would, HR would get an email. So we can go ahead and test this. Let's go ahead and this survey, decline this and submit it. We get rid of that declined survey, which just popped up in my inbox again. So now things are, when they're declined, it sends the email. It's assuming that HR is taking care of it and moving on. So now we need to go ahead and add all the rest of the logic. So in this survey, let's just go back here to this survey. We have 4 questions if we accept this. So the first one is a temperature question. So we're going to want to do a comparison. If it's greater than 100, we're going to advise them to stay home. If they've had symptoms of COVID in the past 3 days, we would advise them to stay home or require, whatever that case may be. If they've been caring for someone who has COVID, we'll have them stay home. If they've not been properly socially distancing, we'll have them stay home. So we'll go ahead and add all 4 of these cases in there. So let's just add some switches. Don't know why that's not going away. I'm just going to add 4 of them really quick, just because we know we are going to need 4. And then, okay. So the first one is 100 degrees or more. So if this field from temperature is greater than or equal to 100, we would like them to stay home. And if not, then we will allow them to come into work. So to save that, now we've got the 2 output nodes from that. So this is going to come down to here. Let's label this accept decline. I'm always forgetting to name my nodes. I just always come back later and do it for some reason. So if it's over 100 degrees, and I think I need to switch the logic just for how I like to have things work. So I'm going to have the passing case go over the top, and I'm going to have a failure come down below. So if it's less than 100 degrees, they're passing, right? So if they're less than 100 degrees, I'm going to go ahead and hand it off here. If they have had a temperature in the past 3 days or had other symptoms, and that equals yes. So symptoms, actually remember to name it this time. Exposed to others, and it's going to be exposure, add a case, and it's yes. Actually, it's no, because we want it to be the healthy version goes across the top. And then the final one, if you attended anything that you shouldn't have, large gatherings, we're going to add a case of no large gathering. And save. So if you are not over 100 degrees, you don't have any symptoms, you've not been exposed to others who are experiencing symptoms, and you've not been to a large gathering, we would like to send an email to you saying go to work. So let's add an output to queue. That was the wrong button. Delete that. Add an output. This is going to be to email. So from HR, a message, same again, to a subject and a body. This is email to employee. Push this down a little bit just so it looks a little nicer. So now I'm going to connect this to here, and I'm actually not, I am going to use a mapper, but I'm going to use some logic here. Only thing I'm going to use the mapper for is the email, and mostly I just want it so I have that consistent numbering there, the O3 versus M3. It really just goes a lot smoother when that happens. So the email, this is going to be to the employee. So that's input 2, pulls the employee information. And I'm going to come back to this last switch. And when that equals no, I'm going to go ahead and say that the output 3 subject and the output 3 body is you are cleared to go on site at ActiveG. I'm just going to make that the subject and the body because it doesn't need to be super complicated. So when this and this and this and this are all good, it will send an email saying go to work. Now, in any case that it's bad, we need to send an email, first of all, to the supervisor telling them, look, they're not going to be at work. And we need to send one to the employee and tell the employee not to go to work. So now let's go ahead and add a input because this might be a little confusing, but on the employee and contractor information, if we go to the data here, I can show you that I only have 2 users in here, but I have a supervisor in here. So that means that another user that's in here is the supervisor. So I can query that user. So come back in here, input 3, I'm going to employees and contractors. I need to get email of their supervisor. So I need to use the global ID again. Global ID equals, it needs some quotes here. I'm going to go ahead and $sign for a substitution. Pull in the substitution. Why am I not getting any field? That's because I'm not connected. No, that is interesting. I-1. No, it's I-2. Let's go pull that information real quick. Supervisor. Oh, now it's showing up. Okay, some kind of weird bug was going on there. So global ID equals supervisor. Let's save that. What's going on with this error over here? Oh, I need an action. Send. Always have to have an action. Ah. All right. So then this is get supervisor. All right. Now we're going to need to send that email to the supervisor. So let's add an output. Output 4. I always put a mapper with them. It's just how I do it. So go ahead and connect those. This is going to be email to supervisor. Use the HR email, send a message to subject and a body. Action is send. Gonna get that right this time. Copy that so I don't have to retype that. All right, so then we connect this up. So output 4, I'm going to load up the supervisor's email, which is I3's email. The subject is employee not coming in today. All right. And this could be more complex. They've been instructed to work from home. This is, anyway, yeah, whatever you want this to be. So $, curly brace, here we go, working this time. So input 2, first name, space, $, curly brace, last name, will not be reporting to work today. Go ahead and save that. So now that will send an email to the supervisor. We need to connect all of these situations where they're sick and just bring those to here. So there's the 4 different situations where we don't want them in the office, and those are all hooked together. And now we do one last mapper here. And this one doesn't match up number-wise, but I'll show you why. We need to send an email to the employee and tell them not to come into work today. So we're just going to say email to the employee. We're going to load some information. The 2 is already loaded there. The subject is do not report to work. And we can say due to COVID results, please quarantine, wherever you want it to be. Do not report to work. You're going to spend more time on the language on these things than you are on the actual building the flow. All of the little nuances get way out of hand. So email to employee failed test. So that's clear. And so that comes to here. And then the last and final thing we got to do is connect. I'm going to bring this so it's a little bit more convenient to get to, and connect those together. So that after that email to the employee, it goes and sets that survey as complete. So now we're at final testing stages here. Let's go ahead. I believe we have everything here. So this is a fairly simple workflow that comes together pretty quickly. So let's just make sure that that works. We have the one survey that's still here where Clark Kent was running a 100.3 degree. And let's see how badly this goes. It looks correct, I think. So do not come into work today. Clark Kent will not be coming in. Do not, because of your COVID results, do not report to work. Let's see what came in here. I received a message. I'm actually registered in here as Clark Kent supervisor. So I got an email that says Clark Kent will not be coming reporting to work today. Clark Kent in his email got do not report to work. So that worked all the way through. Let's go ahead and do one more of these. Let's come back to here, accept it. Let's put in a 99 degrees. Say yes. Oh, wait, no, I've not had any symptoms. I've not been around people with symptoms, and I've not been doing bad things. And let's run this one more time just to make sure that I get a come to work email. So here we go. Do I get a come to work email? You're cleared to come on site. So Clark Kent's email, he should get an email saying that he's cleared to come on site for ActiveG. So this is really a simpler workflow, but you can see how everything's used. All of the inputs, switches, mappers, and outputs. It's important to think through your logic ahead of time, kind of know where you're going. If you don't know where you're going, you can really get yourself pretty lost here. But knowing that we need to send the 3 types of emails we need to send can really quickly get us the logic we need. We'll be doing more of these videos, and I hope that you were able to learn something from this and we'll be able to use it someday. Thanks.